My name is Michael Mandillo. I'm president of First Service Residential. We appreciate everyone taking time out to come to this hour session. Before we begin, I just want to do some housekeeping in reference to what the session's about. We'd like it to be very interactive and collaborative with you. But before I do that, I'd like to have our panel here introduce themselves.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Bob Rogers. I'm an executive director with First Service Residential. Happy to be here. Thanks for coming out.
Good afternoon, Andrew Batchel. I'm an executive director with First Service Residential. Thank you very much for coming out and joining our seminar.
I didn't know it was going to be formal. I had to stand to do this. I'm Sherman Britton, Vice President of Lifestyle Operations, and I hub out of Atlanta. So I'm imagining I'm the one that traveled the farthest today to be in this room. I'm delighted to be here, and I don't hear any other Southern accents, but if you do have one, I'd like to talk to you after.
Thank you, gentlemen. By a show of hands, just to kind of understand the dynamics in the room here, how many of you are property managers or in the property management business? By a show of hands. Okay. And then how many are vendors here? Any vendors here? Okay. Thank you. And then how many board members?
Oh my.
Okay, so we are predominantly driven by board members, which is fabulous because I think this is a great topic because it can go in any direction. And we want it to be open and free, but at the same time, we want questions on both ends to be respectful. We want it, if you do have a question, try to kind of get the content of it so that's not a long and multiple questions built in. And the other is we'd like to kind of give each of you an opportunity if you do want to speak. So if somebody has multiple questions, let's make sure we get everybody in the room who wants to speak. And if not, happy to deliver on the second question for you on that. Any questions on that?
Yeah, Michael, can we ask them how many are happy board members?
Well, you just did. Wow, only 3?
4, there you go. Good.
All right. How many people are happy in their life? Okay, that's good. At least we're getting there. So the topic here is top issues your property manager wants you to know. So one of the things I find difficult in this business, and I've been doing this for 27 years, what I have found very difficult is it's really built on the start of relationships. So, and relationships build over time. They don't happen overnight. But part of relationships are no different in our personal lives. We have ups and we have downs, and we have expectations. We have successes and we have failures. But the level of communication is really, really important to the core of building that relationship. And it ultimately then creates a trust. And a trust is on consistency. We have, unfortunately, at times, have not had consistency of maybe a good manager or good service at times. Or there are times where there was no relationship or connection. And in time, if they're not mended, it ends up that the partnership breaks up in that sense. The key to this is try to create a relationship and a partnership with the board, with your manager, and with the management company. But there's some good topics that we can bring up that probably are ones that are very, very sensitive that maybe your manager or management company wouldn't come directly to you with these questions. Because one of the things that we come across with at times is working with a very dynamic group of board members. People that come from different disciplines of skills in their career and expectations that they have seen in their career or what they would want. And there might not be real clarity of together, how do we have expectations and what are we going to achieve our goals in? There's others times where board members fight among each other. Not any of you in here, but everyone out there, there's boards that actually don't see eye to eye. Or there's an agenda that someone may come on the board and saying, you know what, I'm ready to do this and we need to do that. And then sometimes the agenda is, we're not happy with management, we want to get rid of them. And by the way, they're not wrong, but it's a matter of how well do we work together as a group. So asking our panel of experts, what are some of the things that you have seen that might be helpful in that process of when you're working with a very dynamic board, well-skilled, committed, and there's dynamics among the board or maybe different visions on that. So I'll open it up to whoever would take
Sherman.
Wait a minute, so that you're just pointing at me, like I've got to go first? Great question, and just a little bit of background. I'll try to talk fast, although I know that's not Southern. I'll talk as fast as I can, and give you a little bit of background. I was a community manager for many years, went from that into consulting. I've worked with dozens and dozens of communities. I do board training and committee training and management training as a part of my job prior to coming with First Service and now actually with First Service. And I stress at all of those different levels the importance of relationships. I think absolutely relationships drive good communication. Good communication drives great collaboration, and good communication and collaboration improve the possibility for success as a community. And so I stress that at every turn of the head. But the thing that I would say most about is what makes up that relationship and who makes up the team of a community who's working together. So again, what I stress is the team is not just the board, because there's a lot of communities where it's the me versus them, the board against management, management's against the committees, believe it or not, against the board. So the team is important. In fact, I actually think it's interesting that you start with this, because I think if we get a good grasp of this concept and we are able to flesh this out, you're going to have much more success as a community, and you're going to be happier doing it. So here's the idea, is that the team is made up of the board. Obviously, they're at the top of the leadership chain. Everything rises and falls on leadership, and ownership and responsibility falls on the board. The next entity is the committees. Committees work at the direction, and a lot of charters and a lot of governing documents say at the pleasure of the board, right? They use that terminology. So it's important for the committees to understand that role, and that they are a critical part of the whole team, like they're a special team for the whole team. And then you have management, which is a part of that team, and then you have vendors, which are a part of that team as well. All of that is the team. They all have their own special places to be and things to do, but that's the team. And if the boards can grasp that and kind of create that culture in your community, I think you're right on your way to good success. Sorry, did I take too long?
No, it's terrific.
Good night, thank you.
Sure. So
Any feedback on?
So building off of what Sherman said, we spoke about communication is the key to collaboration. I've been in the industry for quite some time. I come with a construction background working for a developer. So are any of the board members here on a developer-controlled board? No, good. So good. I served as the sponsor representative on many boards. And I can't tell you how many meetings I went to as a sponsor representative, and board members wouldn't say what they were unhappy about. And then when I came into community management, it was a similar type of thing, where board members wouldn't communicate with their community manager or their vendors about what are the issues, if you're unhappy about something, it's better to communicate about it and get it out, get in front of it, bring it out in the open. We don't want to hold that something that's bothering us inside when we leave a board meeting. It's better to put it on the table. We talked about the team, the board, the manager, the vendors. When you look at a professional team, everybody collaborates and communicates openly. You know, there can't be hurt feelings. We have to be able to be willing to have those open and honest intellectual conversations, so that way we can work for the common goal, which is for the good of the community. So I would say communication is so incredibly important, from the board to the manager, from the manager to the board, from the vendors to the manager and to the board. Without that communication, we can't have the collaboration, and that's when things start to happen in a negative sense.
So just very briefly, the subject of today was, what do we want boards to know? What for managers to know, for boards to know that managers want to share. And one of the things is, it's important to speak with one voice. It's hard to drill that down. So today we're going to have hopefully an honest conversation about it. But one of the things, it's very difficult if it's a 7-person board, a 5-person board, and the manager is receiving multiple emails from different people providing different direction. So if there's one thing we hope you can come away with is speaking with one voice as a board, providing direction to management with a single voice.
Do you feel so majority in this room, for someone that just came in, the majority of this room are board members. We took a quick poll, and it looks like none of them are in any type of developer control. So there obviously is an area of I want it to be collaborative. Is there a question from your perspective that might be baffling? I want to get personal, I don't, and or about a specific management company or a manager's name. But is there something that you struggle with that you see that creates issues or challenges or barriers from the manager or the management company, if we can theme it? Because maybe there might be areas where we can create more clarity or a way of where it could be better communicated down. Because I do feel a lot of the challenges in my career where I see is level of expectations. Each person has a level of expectation, but no one shared what their expectation was. No one sat down, manager or supervisor or company, to sit with the board and talk about what are the expectations for the year, or maybe it's a 3-year plan. And then who is going to do what? Who's going to be accountable? What's the timeline on that? So that no one's coming back later and wondering why things weren't done. So any questions or any thoughts on your end as board members that might be, yes, sir?
If you said the communication should be through one person, the board, to the property manager. I find it very difficult because I'm in a minority. We had a huge fraud, and the property manager ran away $76,000. We're still trying to trace it up with New Hampshire insurance company. Anyway, I find it go directly to the property manager. He doesn't respond because he's in cahoots with the current manager, who approved his fee increase by substantial sum of money last meeting. They just kept quiet with noise. So there is a lot of problems communicating through one person, the president, who is in cahoots with the manager, hiding the fraud. They had no record of the meetings held in the last 8 years. They had no record of the meetings. So I'm communicating to replace the whole board and property manager as well, with his party to
So the,
So I think what I'm
Is there
hearing-
a law in New Jersey I can go and, sue the board?
Maybe repeat his question, maybe?
All right, so what I think the question is one, you were asking, is it right to communicate, what the question was, one voice to one person? Okay. That's a very unique situation. It does happen, not right. So in a sense where you feel, I mean, that's something where obviously if you as a board member recognize something like that, that clearly is something that you need, I'm assuming you have counsel?
No, I don't have any. I was just got on the board.
Okay, so I would think that would be number one, is to, definitely seek counsel for advice and guidance of that. The last thing you want to do is point fingers and find out that maybe it was just misplaced in a sense on paper, or if it was real money. But I think in that question, you immediately, as someone on the board, should really look to bring counsel in on that, because that's a unique thing. Our topic here is really about how do you keep flow of communication. So from, let's say, 7 board members, sometimes we have 3 board members that are very active, that have a lot of time, that are coming in if it's a sited property, and they're speaking to the manager 20 minutes or 40 minutes or an hour, which is taking their time away from what you're paying the management company and the manager to do, which is to manage your property. And that's, I think, where we were heading, but I do think on that question, sir, you definitely should.
Michael, can I just respond? I think I can maybe give some clarity to that. So, my opinion is that communication should always be fluid. If you're a board member, you should be able to talk to management, you should be able to talk to staff, you should be able to talk to residents, but that doesn't mean that you can give direction to management. I think the direction should come from a board member, the board president, to the management team or to the executive director, general manager. But that's the direction. And the other question was, can you sue? And the answer is yes, because you can sue for anything. You may not win, but you can sue for anything. So.
There was another question, the woman.
Oh, well, I was going to say, I think, I don't know about others, but with the management company and the board, it may be that it's on, like, the management company in some cases has been there a long time, and we have new board members, and the contract may not be as clear as to what is expected of the management company versus the board members.
Sure.
If, like during snowstorms, the board members are there, we're supposed to report out what's the responsibility of the property management, or, the management company in, resolving some issues and negotiating with vendors when we don't think performance has been done versus a board member who aren't necessarily skilled in negotiations and stuff like that. So that's where I find, I don't know about others, but that's where I find it.
So there's two things, and I'm going to pass it to Andy first, but there's two things I think we should break it into kind of silos for a second. So there is a contract on clarity around a contract, and then the second part, I think, is also the part of your question, is clarity around responsibilities. So there's certain things that need to be clear in contracts, and then the separate from that is need to be an understanding on your operations or your procedures of it. So I'm going to pass it.
So Michael spoke earlier about expectations, and oftentimes when the expectations aren't set, it leads to frustration, particularly for a new board. So one of the things that I found in my time, and sometimes we don't do it perfectly and we have to regroup on it, is when a new board comes in, you have to have a collaboration meeting. There has to be a sit down and a conversation, because as new board members, where you might have been attending meetings, you don't know the specifics of the management contract. You don't know the specifics of contracts with vendors. And that's where there's a ramp up that comes along with that, where you need to be brought up to speed. And we talk about the collaboration, the communication, and even training. As a person who's never served on a board before, there's so much that goes into being a board member of a common interest community. There's a fiduciary responsibility, which is the highest standard that you can have. When you look at a community association, it's a business, it's a corporation with some of budgets of over $20 million, some much smaller, but you're still in charge of other people's money. You have money coming in and money coming out. So as a new board coming in, you need to get clarity on that contract. You should get a copy of it. You should sit down and have a meeting just to review what's the responsibility of the management company, what's the role of the board, and set those expectations in the beginning, so that way 3 months after being elected to the board, you're not incredibly frustrated to understand what your responsibility is.
And just to add to that, keep in mind that prior boards may have handled things very differently than new board members do. So you may have a very different scope when you come on that board of what your goal is at that point. But quite often, if there's a board that had been in place, a majority of that board, it takes a little bit of communication to get through that.
Question, Michael. Who runs those introductory meetings for the new board? For the new members?
Well,
It's very often there's not. I've been on a board for 8 years, going on 10 now, with a re-election. You have a day-to-day operation. You don't have people who are dedicated only to doing that. So does management, you're our management, do you offer to come in to our community and give a prospectus or a roundabout view to the new board? Since you're the management company, isn't it easier for you to do it than for us as the board
Yes.
to try and find time?
yes. And it's a great question, because there's different dynamics that come with that, and I'm going to speak on behalf of my experience and our experience. We have communities that we've been managing for a while, and sometimes because of the turnover isn't so much, we even forget to where we should be refreshing that, and maybe and create an expectation with the board to say, there might be harmony with the board, but it's okay to kind of refresh maybe every 3 years, if that's the case. In reference to new board members coming on or a change, yes, I think you need to lean into the management companies to kind of do a board training, but there are also other professionals out there. Some management companies might not have the capacity. They might be smaller boutique that don't. On the other hand, there's other professionals. But gentlemen, do you want to take a crack at that as well?
There actually is some board training available through CAI, the Community Association Institute, that's available. But I believe, kind of circling all this back, is the expectations need to be set early on, like dead on day one. That's when those expectations need to be communicated. And I think that's fair to say also to the board. I would say within the first 30 to 60 days, with the transition of different board members, there should be some level of training going on. And a part of that training should also be through your council, Like, they need to come in and talk about, from a legal standpoint of view, what should be expected and what the responsibilities are legally of that board. So we give the management side of that, but we do not give the legal side of that. So you should have a legal entity in to speak to the board as well. And there's a reason I have a mic dedicated to myself, and they have to share.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I just want to point out that you talked about the board being a collaborative effort and speaking with one voice. I've been a president of my board for quite a long time, and that's one thing I've learned, that the board can speak with three, four different voices, especially dealing with professionals. If I have to talk to our council, I'm the one who talks to our council. I'm the one who talks to the engineer. I'm the one who talks to the vendor, unless I have given over that duty to another board member to handle that. But everything has to come through me. Now, I'm not a power-hungry fiend, but that's just the way it has to be. I cannot have other board members speaking on behalf of us, then they will contradict. And when that happens, it causes mass confusion. So as much as people might believe that the board president or the person who is in charge has to be in control, it's very necessary, because I can't talk to my council about a resident and have another board member questioning the council and saying to the council something else. Right. It's a very practical way we do things, and it has nothing to do with power. It has to do with practicality. Absolutely. And because the management company is there, they are also a resource for the board. But the board has to be on the same team. We're on the same team. We can discuss among ourselves if we have issues. But then we speak with one voice to the management company or whoever what we have decided. There are boards that are contentious, right, and I know there are, and they can't agree on anything. They can't even make a decision. But this is the way it has to be. Well,
to your point, and yeah, I think this is just something really more of a statement. It's not a question for everyone in general. Is what I've found in this business is there's a great uniqueness about the human side of this that everybody takes for granted. Everyone takes for granted. Board members are chosen to be on a board and elected. And there are certain criterias, but not very high-level criterias, but people run for the board for different reasons. They might have time, their expertise that they bring. They want to protect their assets that within the building. They want to keep their community warm and a community feeling. All those are good reasons to be on the board. But there's different reasons. And then you have the management side. So in New Jersey, different from other states, there is not licensing. So really, there's also hiring and having a manager could have some certain criterias of depending on the company they are hired, and then they're put in this role. So the expectations, I go back to this, because I do think it's the core of where it needs to, is the relationship of each other on the board should be a respectful one. That doesn't mean you have to agree with each other. That doesn't mean that you can't be passionate about what you believe in, but you do have to have respect. And the management side has to also allow for you to freely speak whatever your thoughts. But at the end of the day, if your meetings are lasting 2 or 3 hours and there's no big project going on, something's wrong. Something is wrong, because we solve other larger problems in the world on less time. But it's a matter of leadership. See, board members, I think, need to realize, and I do think all of you bring leadership to the table, but it's your shadow as a leader cast on the community. When they come to a board meeting and they're watching you, it's okay people disagree, but if there's disrespect that's going on, it creates a little bit of pause in people. And I'm not saying that it's happening here, but we see it. We do see it. On the other hand, it's okay to agree to disagree. So the importance of kind of being aligned is not about, do we like each other or do we like and agree on everything? It's a matter, at the end of the day, Did you come with something that you have a topic or a goal? And then allowing the professionals you choose, assuming they can do the job and they're consistent and the loyalty and the trust is there to do that job. And I think in situations like this gentleman said, it does work. But in others, we all probably have seen it in our communities or at other boards that you have seen. And again, this is not about the boards, it's about your leadership. We have to be certain as managers, we have to be guided by you. And then on the professional side, we should be guiding you. That's a genuine partnership. It doesn't happen overnight. If we're failing, then you don't trust us. If we can't deliver consistently, then you're going to fire us. And that's anybody, any management company. But I think what some of the gentlemen were saying earlier is, we call it intellectual honesty, right? There has to be some honest dialogue. Doesn't mean we have to be rude or just honest dialogue. And sometimes that dialogue turns into, wow, there's just a difference in our perception and we need more clarity, which comes back from the woman's question about contract and then what the plan is. If you sit and you kind of put a plan together and you agree on the journey of that plan with the accountability side of it, at least there's clarity now. You know exactly who is doing what. And it's great to capture that because sometimes we have selective amnesia and we forget what we forget, or sometimes we genuinely forget. So those type of things are important. Was there a question here, sir? Do you have a...
Mentioned about 3 people who have time on their hands, and they do have, say, conflicting agendas in terms of what they want done. How does the management company manage the board?
Just for me, as Michael said, it really does come down to intellectual honesty. We're big on getting everybody to the table and having it out. We can have a SWOT session and review, your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. But for the most part, it really comes down to getting everybody at the table and letting management lead that discussion. Let us come in the door and bring the board members together. Create an agenda and really just, I hate to say hash it out, but sometimes that's what it takes. Sometimes it takes there's professionals, there's attorneys, everybody listens to their attorneys and their engineers. Management's in a little different bucket. You need a license if you're a plumber to take to fix your faucet, but any management company can kind of put up a sign and manage your property. So I think at some point you just have to develop a trust in your management team and let them bring those people to the table and lead you as opposed to trying to lead them.
Well, that's easier said than done.
Yeah, for sure.
So we walk into we call it the politics. And the politics is who's in charge really and has 2, 3 other board members kind of in their camp. And the point is that we want to stay together in this partnership. At the same time, we have to be sensitive in how we deliver that message because some people say they want to hear it, but their actions aren't. So it is a very fine walk. I could tell you that most managers, not all, but most managers, it's probably the most stressful thing that a manager goes through. And it's hard because in some cases, those managers might be the only people at home that are delivering their paycheck. And then they feel if this goes sour, I could lose my job. So that's where it has to kind of go from the core of maybe the foundation just needs to be rebooted because it might be just the way people communicate to each other or the tone. Now, it's easy. I always say when people work in an organization, it's easy because there's a barometer. It's called a paycheck, right? So the barometer is that people are going to say, you know what, I don't want to lose this job or I don't want to challenge my career. Maybe I should listen. When you're working with volunteers, there's a different passion because, you can't do that. So it is it's very, very tough. And I'm sorry I don't have a precise answer because I think we're still trying to figure it out at times because we find things and going, wow, that worked great, but another dynamics doesn't. And by the way, a lot of times the management company is behind all this. So we have to take charge in our leadership to kind of bring it together. And there's times where we're allowing it. So it's not gelling. It's work in progress.
Michael, one of the things, though, I think we have to make clear is that management doesn't manage the board. The board is really kind of, they're at the top, remember. They are the leaders of the organization. We can facilitate, we can give our input, we can give some guidance, but at the end of the day, the decision is the board's. about that. And one thing that you hinted on just a minute ago, Michael, you didn't actually use the word, but it certainly was implied there, is that the board also sets a lot of the culture for the community as well. You know, you see communities, I've worked with communities in the past, and the community really is a dysfunctional community. I'm sitting in my office, there's someone that shows up at my door and says, the Atlanta Channel 5 News is at the gate, they want to know what's going on in your community. And then the board comes into my office and says, what's going on? Why are the people acting this way? Well, the last board meeting was was how they were developing that culture. And so I think it's important for the boards to understand that you all play a part in the development of the culture of your community. And you have to think about that as you move forward.
And by the way, this is not in all your communities. We're just kind of
No,
talking
no.
high level, and we want to go back to the word, it's a partnership. Vendors play a part in this. Residents play a part in this. Supporting cast, I'll call them, and that's other expertise that you lean into, or professionals like accounting and attorneys and management. It's all of us have our fingerprints on this. So this is not about saying, hey, the board, you did this, or management, you did this. It's to recognize and saying, wow, this in some cases might be bigger than you think it is. And it's just being a bit open and see past kind of the day-to-day things that need to be done, which are important, but also kind of sometimes look above and seeing how is it run, and also holding the management company more accountable and saying, why aren't you communicating with us? And by the way, we've stepped in that. So, this is not our world is clearly not perfect. We're trying to do things, in that way. So we see it going, God, we did it great here, and we really were not good here. And how did that happen? Was there a question in the back, ma'am?
More of a statement than a question. I wanted to just say that I agree with that gentleman and spoke before in the front, because I also am president of the board where I am. I've been on the board for 8 years and I've been president for 3 years. But when I first became president, I said to the manager, I said, I want to know what my role is. I understand president and all the officers, but in a community. And she said something that resonated with me and still does. She said, your voice is the voice of being the communicator. You communicate with the attorney, with the management company, with other board members, with the homeowners. You're the one voice that is the communicator. So we've done things just as he does. I am the one that sends emails and sends my voice to the attorney and management all the time. But I also have meetings with our other members, and we discuss issues on our own, just so that everybody's in the loop. We're all in it together. It's a team.
But I'm assuming that there's an understanding, right? So you're getting input, it sounds like, from your fellow board members,
yes.
which is
They are
important.
they're
So that's
totally-
clear.
yes.
And then you're communicating.
Yes.
So there are boards where you see this and it's working. It sounds
Yes.
like it's working. That
It
doesn't mean
is.
that there's probably disagreements, right, among the board members sometimes.
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 But we move on. We go.
No, never a disagreement. What?
Yeah.
Thank you for that. And again, it's kind of good sometimes to bounce off each other of what other communities are doing and the successes that you're having. And also, most important is recognizing and owning the failures. But the failures are not all bad unless they're very catastrophic. The failures are where we really dig in to see what we can do to improve in all of our leadership that plays a part in that. Was there a question back here, sir?
Question is this. When a board is looking to hire a property manager, as you walk around here, there's maybe 10 or 15 property managers around, 20. What should they look for? Is there a basic concept of what to look for when you're going to hire a property manager? And there are many things, depending on what the board wants, and this could turn into a doctorate dissertation, but are there just some basic things that a new board could look for when they start to look for a property manager?
Well, I think one of the things you need to do as a board, and just my opinion, is to create an RFP. Lean into it exactly, and you hit on it. What is it exactly that you feel you're not getting today with the management company, and hone in on those type of themes? Is it a lack of consistency with the manager? There's manager turnover. or there's maybe no support for that manager? Is the skill set more of a reactive versus, kind of visionary and reactive? What are the actual things that you're looking to do in your community via projects? Because if it's driven on projects, you might be looking for a management company that has some depth and resources behind that for that. So there's really not one specific, but it is really looking at what is it exactly that you want that you're not getting. Now you might say, we don't know. We don't know what we want, and we're looking. Well, then I think if that's the case, there's a lot of professionals in a sense that can share and create, from attorneys, even management companies that will help create an RFP. But then it's great to shop it. Look at different organizations. Look at some boutique organizations, medium size, larger organizations, and get a feel. It's no different than if you're shopping for a car. Most cases, you don't know as much as the mechanic, but you do some digging. The internet has been great. We're seeing more today versus 15, 12 years ago. We're seeing in people searching for management companies, they're doing more research before they meet and know more about the management company. They're looking on, they're comparing, they're seeing the properties that they manage. They're talking to vendors, where back before the internet, there was probably, 6 touch points that a person would on average make before they actually do a purchase. Now there's like 26, because there's so much information you can get of that. So even if you're not sure what you're looking for, get a list. CAI has a list of the property management companies. Take a list, look at the ones. Do a little research on the internet. Have someone on the board if it's something where you're not comfortable with, or it's not your area of expertise. But definitely it's looking for the right fit. But I could tell you that resource and depth is important, but relationship and alignment. That's where I think if everyone in here who is enjoying and having a good experience with your management company or your manager, my guess is there is alignment. There's understanding, there's good, honest communication and trust, and there has to be some level of success, because you wouldn't be with them that long. But that doesn't necessarily mean they're the right fit, because there might be other companies that can bring other resources to the table.
Can I ask you one question?
Please just add to the
If there is no registration or professional association, they have to be members as a property manager. There's no licensing required.
Correct.
None at all?
Not in New
And
Jersey.
Tom, Dick, and Harry can get there.
Yes.
Correct.
And literally there are Toms and Dicks and Harrys
Yes.
that are on, yes.
Property Management
Yeah,
Co.
not in New Jersey.
Yes.
Other states, they're absolutely, and then it's, no different than a licensed realtor or a broker. But there has been talk for many years, but nothing, I feel, I don't know if there's any attorneys in here. I saw Chris here earlier. I don't know if he's still here. But I don't think there's a trigger that's been pulled on that at all that I'm aware of.
They vetoed it, yeah.
Okay.
Michael, just to follow up on that gentleman's question in the back about searching for management companies, once you narrow it down to the final 1 or 2, do yourself a favor, get 4 or 5 references and call those references and have a good conversation about their experience with them. That's usually a huge help.
Can I take it one
Go
step
ahead.
deeper,
Sure.
Michael? So you want a company that has a good solid financial system in place. You want a company that has good compliance and architectural compliance systems in place, so that those are good, solid, because those are the 2 things that can go awry in a community very quickly. And then also, depending on your community, in fact, I would imagine I could say any community should also consider the culture of the management company that you're going to hire, and does that fit with the culture of your community? Communities go through periods, different times, different eras within that community, and you need a management company that fits for what your community is going through at that
And
time.
don't
You
just
look at
ask
that.
for it, see it, touch it and
If
feel
I
it.
can- if I
If
can add
people
one-
can't produce their standard operating procedures or how they go about it, share it with us. Because if they have it, then they should be able to share.
And if I can add one more thing,
Then we'll
you're
move.
inviting the property management company that's bidding on your community to visit your house, visit their house. Go to see your property management company's office. You want to see, is their office organized? Is it neat? Does it show a culture of a company that you'd want to work with? So important. They're looking at you. You should take a look at them as well.
Yes, sir. You do whatever you like, sir.
Are you asking us or them?
You can sing. I'm not sure they'll appreciate that, but you can.
Uh-oh.
Go ahead, Artie.
I don't have this culture in our community. Our board is, we don't always agree with each other, but we successfully manage our property. The service that we get from First Service, who is our company, is outstanding because we have a relationship with them. And we also have a relationship with every single vendor we use. That's how we base our place, and we get along like unbelievable. That's why I am flabbergasted by what I'm hearing today about boards that don't get along and that kind of stuff. It's hard for me to believe.
It's not the people in here, it's the people out there.
We get along with them now. They give us a resource that's unbearable, impossible for us to attain. If we have a problem, let's say with this, they have thousands of places that they manage. Our property manager makes a phone call.
This isn't a commercial,
I'm gonna answer
Lord.
you like that.
I'm appreciative, but it's not a commercial.
But
This is-
I don't
this
work
is-
for them. I don't work for them. I am
But thank you.
flabbergasted by what I'm hearing about them.
Can you guys hook them?
What?
But I'll go back to the, thank you very much, though, thank you. I want to make sure we get, and I do appreciate it. But
But Michael, I think that's an important statement, is that it's true that not all communities have boards that get along all that well, and
Yeah,
there really needs
that's
to be
real.
there really needs to be some conversation about the fact, remember, the boards are at the top of the leadership rung, and it's their responsibility to kind of make sure that those boards are functioning properly, and a lot of that comes through training, having someone, if you're not comfortable doing that yourself, I'm not even sure you should do it even if you are comfortable, have someone come in from the outside and talk them through the importance of the role of the board. And let me just stress, it's important for the boards to stay at that 30,000-foot view of the community, and when they start getting down into the micromanaging of that, it can become quite cumbersome for all parties, all entities that are on the team. So stay high at that level, and then if there's a dysfunctional board member, the responsibility is for the board to step in and take corrective action to fix that kind of rogue board member or members.
I think it's important. I was a volunteer in another field for 20 years. And one of the things that sticks with me that I learned very early on is that volunteerism is not an excuse for unprofessionalism. So when you look at a community association, you're still a business. And when you're communicating with your fellow board members in your community, think about how you're communicating, and would you communicate that way at work, where you're receiving a paycheck? And these are the ways to have healthy conversations with your peers, with your fellow board members, to remember that the goal of the board is to protect and enhance property values. Mm-hmm. That's your goal. There's no other mission. Everything else that you do is to support that, to enhance and improve your property values. And from there, then you get into your policy governance. But you have to treat it as a business and be respectful and professional with yourselves and with your community. Because without that, then you have the bad culture. Then your residents see that and they emulate that. And that's what leads to a difficulty within a community.
And we understand the difficulty of running it as a business, because not only is it a business, but it's your neighbors and it's your home, and that puts a whole new dynamic on the business aspect of it.
any other questions? Sir?
I have a question. I'm a board member on a small association, and I know you mentioned kind of refreshing the association every 3 years or so. We kind of have an issue, since we are a small board, with kind of just getting people involved in the association. So we try to think of incentives. We don't really have a problem with projects and getting people to help on projects, but just getting people to commit to being on the board. Do you guys have any recommendations in terms of incentivizing people to be a little bit more active and involved in the board?
So I'll take the first crack at this. I think, by the way, that is common a lot, not just from small, but we see large communities that really struggling to get the volunteers there. You know, I think it goes back to the maybe looking at the culture of the community. When I say the culture, I mean as board members, and this might be something where some board members say, I don't have time to do that. But it's a little bit old school, but it works, is knocking on doors of your fellow residents and saying, look, you know, we care about this community. We care about the value of all of our homes. We are volunteering, and we need more help and more support. This is for all of us. It's a bit of maybe educating and leaning into your management company and figuring how can you recruit from an education perspective. So I think all of us have probably been in this situation when someone gets us alone and talks about something that maybe they're looking for a donation of some sort. If it touches you one way or another, you're going to be open more to look if it's something to help somebody. But it's easier to be a name that you don't know and a face that you don't see. So I believe even in businesses, you've got to humanize it. The more that people can feel that you humanize, this is our home, this is our community, and we'd love to see our value in our community stay, or if not increase. But we need to do this together. We're looking for, and it's really, it's sometimes it's uncomfortable for people. There's other people that are very good at it, and they have no problem with knocking on the doors and really working on. You'd be really great on the board. It's not easy. It is not easy. There's no magic like one piece to it or another. But I do think the consistency of your message is what make people believe. It's what your belief is, and if you stand behind it, there's a good shot you're going to find one other person that may, but it's got to be a consistent message, not, well, we send mailers out, we do this. It's got to be more than that.
So just to follow up on that gentleman's question, you said you have people who are okay with helping with projects and stuff, but it's more board. Do you have any committees at all, or no?
We've had a couple of committees.
Okay, because a lot of times that will breed board members. That's one thing about committees. It'll generally, you'll get one or two people that really like getting involved. Or you can have social events. A lot of times, if you know, I don't know how many units you have, or how small is it when you say small property?
We have probably about maybe 25 units.
Okay, yeah. So
It's
maybe
tough.
That's tough.
Yeah,
That's
it's
tough.
tough to get people involved.
How do you so what happens a lot of time in communities is the board members are incredibly busy, and they really use every opportunity they have to tell the community just how much time and effort they're giving to the community, and that isn't always a good plan, right? So if I don't know how busy you are as a board member, but if you're at the annual meeting or every board meeting that you have, you're telling the community how incredibly busy we are, might want to just curtail that just a little bit.
Good advice.
Or you could just raise maintenance 20%, you'll get lots of volunteers.
We've actually had a president once, and wasn't here, but another community, who put out a message because they wanted attendance at a meeting, and they floated the rumor that maintenance was going up tremendously. And it was amazing how many people showed up at that meeting. So
That and
wouldn't-
food.
Wouldn't
That's another
recommend
one.
it. That was out there.
Food-
So
food
yes,
pulls them
maintenance
out.
going up, and food and cookies.
Wine.
Cookies brings them in.
Wine and cheese,
all right,
that
that's
always-
Atlanta.
But one
Yes.
thing that's happening, there's a trend. And the trend is that you need to look on is there ways you could be more efficient as a board and communicate with less time to meet. So a lot of people, they really do, they like to meet. But you can look at some of this stuff and say, you know what, that agenda was passed around 3 days before. And everyone had an opportunity to review that agenda and email to one source, may be your manager, or to a board member, one source, any questions that you have. Because sometimes the agenda might say, hey, we agree with this, we agree with the time, and then you might not have to meet. Or there's now, the ability to Skype. So that's the other thing, is where I think the trend is going, is that more and more board members are going to want to say, look, we want to cut out meeting 2-3 times a month, 2 hours, or once a month. Let's get communication out on a weekly basis. Let's see what we're doing. I mean, even in your jobs or your careers, there's times where you might say, wow, I see my boss once a month. Well, that was your career and your job, So on this side of it, we're in a community. If we're passing information on regularly, there's clarity around what we're looking for. Now, look, if it's necessary, if there's something large going on, then meet, and you might have to meet for 3-4 hours. But look at it the ways of, is there ways of creating better efficiencies? So then you can attract people. Say, look, we meet 4 times a year, but we do have an hour conference call. Sometimes it's a little longer depending on the topic and what we agree and what we don't. We communicate via email weekly, and that might be somebody, you know what? I can do that. I'm okay with that.
Yeah,
Again,
you're-
I don't know the dynamics in any of your worlds per se, but that's another area of looking.
You're actually swimming upstream because
get
the
that.
trend I would say the industry and probably globally outside the industry is for volunteers to want to have shorter times of commitment, right? And do things that are definitely fun for them. So I know being on the board isn't necessarily fun, but if you can make it as fun as possible so that, again, nobody wants to be on a board that's fighting all the time and not getting along. And so there's just some dynamics, but you're swimming upstream in your community. And I actually live in an HOA of probably 120 homes. We have the exact same issue that you have, and they asked me to volunteer, and there's no way I'd be a board member in my own community.
So this gentleman had a good question, and he said, in those scenarios, if a board chooses to do that, how do you communicate with the community? So great question. And so the start, before you come up with how many times to meet or how, it's also looking at currently how are you communicating with the community. And then it might be some dialogue on figuring how can we get the message out, or when do we need to meet. There might be rules that, your bylaws might say you have to meet with the community X. Then it requires a little bit more deeper thinking, or it might have to be a meeting in that sense. So it's not a perfect fit for everything. It's kind of taking a dive and looking under the hood, because some communities do this. Others, nope, there's great volunteers. They all come. We want to do it. Then that's your culture. It's fine. Don't change it. If it's working, we're not saying anything is right over others. It's about just being open-minded, staying curious through a process of understanding and listening, and then figuring, does it work for us? And if it does, then great. If it doesn't, then you might not want to go down that avenue.
Michael, if I can just add one thing also, because the seminar was what we want you to know, from our perspective. If there's one thing that I can give you, when you talk about meetings and people with their time that they give in, from a manager's perspective, there's nothing, and I'm not saying it's anybody in this room, but there's nothing more frustrating for a manager to go into a meeting and the board members are just opening their board packet for the first time at that meeting. So, because that's when things aren't productive, because that's when you're just researching and getting an understanding of what the agenda is. And Michael talked about the email, the agenda that circulated days before. If a board member can come to a meeting prepared, if you have a board of 7, imagine the impact of all 7 members being prepared for that meeting with their notes already on the topic, their concerns, what they want to discuss. And even floating that before the meeting, that meeting will be so much more beneficial than the board just sitting down, opening their packet for the first time at that meeting and not being prepared for it. Again, we talk about treating it like a business. You wouldn't walk into a business meeting unprepared. So that's where, as choosing to be a board member, it's a choice. And you're taking on that fiduciary responsibility for your community to be prepared for meetings, to be able to make informed decisions. And the only way to make informed decisions is to understand what that information is.
So just a time check, there's 3 minutes here, so we're respecting your time that you came for the hour. We'll take, if you have another question, anyone?
I just want to tack on to what Andrew said. I once put out an agenda, a board package for a workshop, Thursday before a Tuesday workshop, and it was maybe 20 items. Item 13 was, the first director who emails me that they read this item, I'll take $100 out of my pocket and pay you.
That's great. Nobody read it.
I'd like to add to something that the gentleman said.
Sure.
And for what you said also about trend. And I live in a condominium community of 63 units where board members do not get along because it's like it's personal to them. And what is good for them and what is not good for the complex. That is what sometimes, and I know a lot of people face the same thing. Board unit owners not attending meetings. When you have the annual meetings, it's just a handful of people. More renters than owners living in the complex. So the unit owners, they're receiving the rent and they don't care about what is happening in the complex. And I know more and more we are having townhomes and condos. Who is governing these issues when you cannot deal with it on a board level? Management will not handle this. It all depends on the board. Is there a higher level statewide that will deal with this without an attorney?
Sure. The overseeing body of property management is the DCA, the Department of Community Affairs. And well, yeah, I don't want to speak ill of them, but they don't have a lot of teeth in order to enforce that. So that is the governing body, the DCA.
We could certainly speak about it. We're being told to wrap up.
Yeah, we unfortunately, there's another, we could take questions. So, by the way, thank you so much for your time. We really, really appreciate it. Hopefully you got a couple of nuggets that you can take here. Enjoy the rest of the conference, and thank you very much.
We'll be around.